Welcome to another CircleCI webinar. My name is Vinny and I'm a senior solutions engineer. Here with me is Tracy from NeuVector, who will be joining us on this webinar today.
Hi, everyone.
All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. On the agenda today, got a very quick introduction to CircleCI and CI/CD, and I'll also give you a quick demo as well. And then after that, we'll segue immediately into NeuVector, where Tracy will take over and talk about how NeuVector can help you do more better secure pipelines and security practices. Excuse me, sorry, I just got something caught in my throat. This always happens when it's time to actually present.
Exactly. We could talk for 20 minutes and then we go into live and it's immediate choking up.
Okay, all right, that's enough embarrassing myself here. So at CircleCI here, our mission is to make it as easy as possible to go from idea to delivery. So what does this mean? This means that we provide a product that helps people better optimize and automate their CI/CD processes. We were founded in 2011, and we're now at more than 480 employees across 5 continents. We're trying to expand to 7 continents, but there's not a lot of demand for CircleCI in Antarctica right now, so we're still trying to find a product market fit there. We're currently the world's largest shared CI/CD platform. So what does that mean? This means that we're one of the largest CI/CD platforms that runs on a public cloud provider. And so we were built for the cloud. We have more than 3 million builds running per day on our platform. And the best thing about us is that we're framework agnostic. We support all the major platforms and operating systems. And so you'll find customers on our platform building, iOS and mobile devices. You'll find people doing typical web application builds, Node.js, Ruby, any language that you can build on any Linux machine or Mac OS or Windows, you can build on our platform as well. Here are some logos from companies, big companies and customers who trust us with their CI/CD pipelines. So for those of you who may be a little bit less familiar with CI/CD overall, here is where CircleCI sits in the tool chain. So upstream, you've got your version control services. This is where your developers are committing their code. What happens is that when they make their changes and they commit these changes, we detect those commits, and then we automatically kick off builds for you. And so in CircleCI, you've got your orchestration. People are doing everything from basic unit tests and integration tests to even crazier things like generating documentation, deploying documentation. You've got people doing blue-green deployments. You've got people doing Kubernetes on our platform. Whatever the situation is, we can reliably accommodate that situation. And then finally, downstream, you've got the actual environment that you're deploying your applications to. And so once CircleCI is done testing, vetting your changes, we can also deploy your changes to whichever environment that you need to deploy to. So, of course, I can say all this and make it sound all fancy, but of course, it's probably better to just show you, right? And so, what does our platform look like? How do typical users and developers interact with CircleCI? So, I'm going to go ahead and flip over to a different screen here. This is GitHub. On GitHub here, I'm showing you a pull request where I made some changes and I want to merge it into the master branch. You can see here that I've already, I made some breaking changes and I already fixed them. That's just in the interest of time. But if I go ahead and open the broken changes here, okay, I'm taken to the check screen in GitHub. You can see here that let me zoom in a little bit here. You can see here that one of my jobs failed and subsequently a couple of downstream jobs were blocked from running. So if I go ahead and open this job here, I'm taken to what's called the job details page in CircleCI. And so this is where you're going to find all of your information about your builds, what happened, what's the output, etc. And so here you can see that I'm given the information that I care about as a developer. You can see that I ran 14 tests and 2 of them failed. And here is the output for those failed tests. If you want to, you can see all of this output in context with the rest of the job. So if you switch over to the steps tab, you can see all the steps are nicely separated in drop-down panels. And then here is the actual output of the tests that I ran. Now, one of the really beautiful features of CircleCI is that, sometimes it's really not obvious what the problem is or why a test broke. And so you can actually SSH into a job and actually poke at files, look at logs, etc., while the job is running. Really great for you developers to debug things. So that's the job details page. If you zoom up, you can see workflows. Workflows consist of one or more jobs. And so you can see here that because this test job failed, these two downstream jobs did not run. And so if I flip over to my terminal here, you can see on the right-hand side is the configuration for what you're seeing on the left-hand side. In CircleCI, we believe in configuration as code. That way it's versionable and trackable just like the rest of your source code. And so you can see here at my workflow definitions, I've got test, test parallel, and parameterized command. And because test parallel and parameterized command did not, because test didn't pass, these other two tests did not run. And so this is the configuration that you write to configure these dependencies between jobs. Now, you might see a bunch of other jobs here that are defined, and these are not visible on the screen on the left because we also give you fine-grained control to run jobs, on certain branches, on certain tags, under certain conditions, etc. So it's really powerful and flexible there. Now, all this configuration that you're seeing, this is just a very high level overview, right? All this configuration that you're seeing is made extremely powerful because of another feature on our platform called orbs. All right. So if I switch back over to my presentation here, with CircleCI orbs, we basically give you the ability to parameterize and templatize a bunch of this CircleCI YAML configuration that defines the commands you run inside your environment, the execution environments, and the actual jobs themselves. And these orbs are shareable across many users, many teams, and organizations, making it easy to not only get up and running very quickly, but to keep configuration up to date and in sync. So just as an example here, what you saw inside the configuration and the job definitions just now was the workflows definition. Now, inside those workflows, you call the jobs, and inside those jobs, you can call individual commands executors. And so by parameterizing these, you can keep a single source of truth without having to copy and paste. And it also gives you a bunch of other powerful capabilities, such as matrix builds, where you can pass parameters into and reuse these parameters across a bunch of different scenarios. And so again, orbs are just reusable, shareable configuration. And of course, these orbs are also what allow us to partner together with so many other companies and vendors. You may have heard of CodeCov, you may have heard of Sonar. There's a bunch of other ones as well. And that leads me to introducing Tracy and NeuVector. NeuVector is one of these such partners that has partnered together with us to write an orb so that you can automate your security in your application. And so at this point, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Tracy to talk more about NeuVector and how NeuVector works together with CircleCI to help you.
Thank you, Vinny. Excellent transition. Hi, everybody. Yes, here to talk about NeuVector, how we have implemented a orb for CircleCI, and to give you a little bit of understanding of our product as well. Container security is our focus. There's a couple of different aspects to NeuVector, and I'm certainly not going to try to cover everything. I want to get to kind of the orb and the automation. We'll talk about that first. So when it comes to NeuVector, I guess the quick skinny on to understand what NeuVector does, it's a couple of different things. We can scan containers for vulnerabilities, compliance settings, security settings, things like that. That's what I'm going to demonstrate with the NeuVector orb, how we can scan as part of a pipeline and provide those results immediately back to you. And then I'll also talk a little bit about our behavior-based controls. The visual that you're looking at right here, where we've got NeuVector at the top. So these are the risk-based controls that are kind of recommended by Gartner and others. You have foundational controls, basic controls for security that more or less you're probably doing a lot of these, if not all of them. The risk-based controls up here at the top, what makes those different is those are specific to your environment, to your application behavior, right? Even vulnerability management can differ from environment to environment because you've built applications different than everyone else, right? So risk-based controls are really just how we're molding, really tailoring security around your specific applications and your environment. So let's talk a little bit about the vulnerability management scanning to begin. From the time a developer builds an image in CircleCI, triggers a build, we can scan that image. And what I'll be showing here is a little demo of our orb, a little bit of technical information of how to implement that orb, some of the different options that you can employ there. That orb, that workflow, that job, then we can pass fail that build. We can also scan image repositories. We have a very fast proprietary built scanner that was built for speed and accuracy. We have customers with over 100,000 images in their registries that struggle with trying to scan the volume that they're trying to scan on a weekly basis. Because we're cloud native and built using containers inside of Kubernetes, we can scale our scanners and accommodate large registry environments. We do plug into admission control. So not only can you have those controls within CircleCI, but you can also have controls within Kubernetes to allow an image if it has been built outside of the pipeline or being deployed. And we can scan images that are running live. The orb, you can find it on the NeuVector / NeuVector orb 1.02. So fairly recent version, late last year. Let's take a quick look at some of this. And forgive me, I'm going to get a couple of different windows open. So on the right here, this is the website where you would find that orb. And we've got some quick start. We've got some examples down here. The latest version, so what I want to kind of point out here is you'll notice down here in the workflows, right? So we have a scan image workflow. We've got a scan private registry workflow and this scan local image workflow. So within this orb, we are able to do a local scan. And you can notice here, if you look at some of the parameters when we talk about scanning local image, you have the image name, the tag, see this path here. So, and the image tar file. So we're talking about an image that has been tarred, is local on the environment, on your laptop or in your development environment. So we can scan that image there. And again, as you would expect up here, if it's a private registry, we can scan those and scan an image that's has been deployed in a registry. This one up here at the top is the one that I'll demo as part of this orb. The other things, and you notice from some of these parameters here, and I'm not going to walk through all of these, but you'll notice that we do have like high vol to fail. So that's kind of a key parameter. How many high vulnerabilities are we going to say that this build will fail on? Or if it's mediums, etc. So reasons to fail the build or to stop the build so that it, you stop your pipeline and can go back and remediate those things. So in my GitHub environment, I have a small environment. I actually got this from CircleCI. Thank you very much. Great instructions, phenomenal documentation for a newbie such as myself. It's always nice when you don't have to go to Stack Overflow to get your information, right? So you can see here in my CircleCI config YAML, I am using the NeuVector orb 1.02, a couple of an image provided by CircleCI as part of kind of one of their how to do this hello world type of things. At the very bottom where I've got my the workflow build and scan, I do the build and I do the scan here. What I'm going to do is I see right now I've got high vulnerabilities to fail. Let me refresh this and make sure I've got the latest. There we go. That's what I thought. So high vulnerability to fail is currently set to 10 and medium is set to 10. If I go to, where did I lose my window for Circle? There we go. There's my pipeline. So you can see here, let's refresh this. Ran this as recently as 8 minutes ago. And you can see we were able to do a build, we'll do a scan. I'm going to kick this off, but we're going to watch it kind of as it goes. I'm actually triggering this from GitHub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this file for my CircleCI config. And what I want to do is I'm going to change this high vulnerability to fail. I'm going to set that to 0. Basically, or let's just set it to 1, but I can set it to. So basically, if I have one high vulnerability, we will fail the build. If I set it to 0, that's a good question. I don't know. I think it will also fail it the same way. I'm going to set the vols for medium. So this would mean we can't have any vulnerabilities in this image. When I commit that change here in GitHub and I go to my pipelines, we see that that pipeline has now been triggered. And so we're watching this build. So let's take a look at this workflow and spinning up the environment. So this will take a few minutes. So what this is going to do is it's going to spin up this environment. It's going to run the first portion of this build, do some quick tests on this. Normally this takes 35, 40 seconds in previous testing. And then from that workflow, then we will get to this NeuVector scan image, and that will do the scanning. So here's where it might have been a good idea for me to have a little bit of Jeopardy music or something like that as this goes, because usually this is very, very fast. Let's go back to our dashboard while this is running. And I will point out, since we're almost, so we've finished that, now we're at the NeuVector scan image portion where we're spinning up the environment, etc. And we do that scan. This will take also very little time. So now we're checking criteria, and we see here criteria high to fail 1 as we set, and the medium vulnerability to fail we set to 0. We found 1 high vul and we found 0 mediums, but we failed that build because we had a high vulnerability, right? So pretty straightforward. If we find vulnerabilities, we are going to fail that build. And so if I go back and obviously if I look at this scan here, it'll say that this failed with the scan image. So as a developer, I know now immediately that I missed something. I need to update a library. I need to make a patch. I need to do something with this. So very fast, accurate scanning with the NeuVector scanning using that orb. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. If you're watching this and you're doing this, watching the recording of this, and you're figuring out how to do this, I do want to make a couple of points, and I'll bring this back to this section here because I ran into some issues with our orb because I had intended to do this scan image up here, and I had set all of these parameters. And you can see over here on the left where we're looking at the actual workflow that I had built, that I have the registry URL, I have the repository. So I had all of these elements that you're seeing right here, but the my build kept failing because it said that I needed additional parameters that I didn't feel like I needed. In fact, what it was asking for was these parameters down here, the path and image tar file and things like that. Well, I wasn't doing a local image scan. I wanted to do this scan image. And so I had made the assumption that those were the only parameters that I needed to make. Well, one of the things I love about good documentation is as I scroll down here to the jobs and the scan image job, and I can look at that source. So I had seen that, yes, we have all of these parameters that need to be passed in. I didn't quite realize that I need to pass in all of the parameters regardless if they're going to get used or not. So when I was able to look at the job source, and the very first thing I see is parameters for scanning an image. So here's all of those parameters, and they appear to all need to be defined in some sort of way. And so I didn't realize that. So as a helpful tip, yes, you do need to define those parameters, even if you're not going to use them, because as we get down here to the steps, the condition, well, if the parameter is scan local image, yes, we're using the registry URL, password, all of these components that you would need to have to scan the image if it's locally. Otherwise, you just need to use the repository, registry username, all of these. So these are the ones that I was using. So short story, by realizing that I needed to pass all those parameters, that's what I just added some parameters for things that, these are not necessarily real, but I added them. And as soon as I did that, this thing worked perfectly. So, so again, options for scanning would be scanning an image on a registry or in a registry, scanning a private registry that may be a local, maybe it's your local dev environment, and then of course, and a local image of any kind that you just happen to have stored on your file system. So that's the first way we can automate some security into CircleCI, into your pipelines. The second one I'm going to have to show you because I didn't get it done. And I'm just going to own up to it that I ran out of time, ran out of runway before I could get this in. But this is, I felt would be really, really interesting. The other thing that NeuVector does, and really this is something that no other product does. And I know, yes, security vendors and their very lofty claims that they like to make. But our runtime security does something different. What you're looking at here on this screen is the network traffic that is occurring within my Kubernetes cluster. Now, there's other products that will represent this. They'll use eBPF, IP tables, port labels. We're actually looking at the real traffic. We're looking at all of the internal traffic, whether it was defined or not. If it's in a manifest, that's fine. We're not using the manifest to represent what's happening. We're using live traffic to represent what's happening. And we have a learning mode that allows us to do this so that we can capture the behavior at layer 7. So these blue lines that you're looking at, that's real network behavior. As I click on those, you can see that we're capturing the application layer. So that's layer 7. We can identify and validate that application layer for any traffic happening inside of the cluster. The blue lines represent, and we'll just jump to, yes, now we're talking about the runtime. Thank you, Tracy, for that. These operational modes, let me explain those. We have a discover mode where we learn the behavior. We do this for both the network and all of the processes. So if you think about any kind of attack, exploit, zero-day malware, it's always a combination of network and processes, right? They have to get to the location, they have to do something, they have to extract the information. It's always a combination of those two. So we learn all of the behavior of your applications. Then we can do a monitor mode or protect mode. And what these do is they turn that discovery, that learning behavior off. And now we use what we've learned. We create this kind of a zero trust bubble over your application, over your service. It could be over the entire cluster. But basically what we're saying is that we've seen the known behavior. We know how your application behaves, all the network connections it's making, all the processes that it's running. And we're going to create security policies around that so we can alert you when we see something that doesn't match that behavior. Any network connection, any egress, any network traffic internally, any process, someone bashing in with root, even if they have escalated privileges, we can detect that and we can alert you that there's this behavior going on. You may want to investigate that. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's good. It's just something that you haven't seen before or that we haven't seen before. The reason I'm talking about this in the context of operationalizing or automating security is here. So if I go to my policy groups, you'll notice I'm going to filter down to a demo group. So what I wasn't able to show is if I select a number of these, and again, down here at the bottom, notice we've captured processes, we've captured network rules. You see the CRD, that's what we're going to actually create. So let me go to just a little bit different environment that doesn't have the CRDs. We'll go to the same exact area for our groups. I'll filter down to the demo. And so you see we've got these groups here. So same thing. We're in a mix of this monitor protect mode here. We've got network rules that we've learned. We've got process file rules that we've learned. So what is the automation, Tracy? What point are you trying to make here? Yes, if I select a group of these, and I can do this within a namespace, across namespaces, I can define groups as anything I want it to be. I can export those security policies. We also have file access rules. I won't go too much into that. These are manual. We monitor a select set of strategic locations like Etsy password, user local bin, sensitive locations. We're already monitoring those. If you want to add a storage, a mount point, any recursive directory that you want to monitor or protect, we can add those. But basically what we're doing when we select all of those is we're going to export in a YAML file the security policies that we've learned, the processes, the networks, any file access, and we can put this in automatically into a YAML file that then, let's name this, just come up with a random name for that file there. Yes. And so when I look at this, you will see that, hope everybody's getting the joke. Hello, friends. Yes, so you see here, we've got this YAML file that basically, if you're familiar with Kubernetes YAML file, so this is security policies as code. What Vinny was talking about, that, CircleCI loves infrastructure as code, everything as code, because that allows you to version control it, know what's going on, use it in multiple environments. That's exactly what this is. We can export those security policies. You can pull those from one environment and then apply them to other environments. So if you learned the behavior in development, or maybe you learned the behavior in QA, you can export those security behaviors and then apply them to integration tests, perf tests, pen tests, staging, pre-prod, prod, right? You can actually make these security policies part of that pipeline and then apply it to those clusters and use that to create these zero trust bubbles so that you can get alerts when you see anomalous behavior. One of the stories that I have been told, and I don't know that this is all true, but we know that one of our car manufacturers had a little Kubernetes incident because there was a password that simply wasn't protected. They didn't change the default password. Someone figured out, on the internet, was doing some kind of scan, found it, and began using the environment for crypto mining. They didn't even know it was happening until someone from accounting came and was like, we're seeing huge bills in this one area. Why are we scaling up these resources to accommodate whatever's going on there? Oh, we've got some crypto mining. Well, if they had been using NeuVector and had been creating these zero trust bubbles, using this kind of behavioral detection to know what their behavior was and then identify something that wasn't their behavior, they would have seen that from day one, not when accounting came with a bill saying, why is this weird, right? That's a bad place to find out that you've got something going on in your environment. So this is what I was hoping to show. I wanted to pull this using our API from an environment, apply it to a different environment. It turned into a little bit bigger pipeline that I could do in a short time frame. So I'm explaining that, yes, you could also use CircleCI to automate pulling this, applying it to these other clusters, and giving you really good information using those sources of truth, network traffic, and processes running on all of your container processes. So with that, that is pretty much the summary of my presentation here. Again, we have this CircleCI orb working. My build failed, check criteria. We do also can upload artifacts, different reports as part of that orb. But that kind of brings me to the Q&A portion of our presentation. Any questions, comments, chat? Everybody have a good nap? I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything in the Q&A.
Yeah, we'll wait a few minutes and let people see. Oh, it looks like one person made a comment, said that Tracy is so sarcastic. Good presentation. Yeah, that was a good presentation, by the way. I really appreciated you going through all that. I like completely understand what's going on with NeuVector and how it's functioning with CircleCI. So really appreciate that. Sometimes I watch other demos of people's tools with CircleCI, and I'm just like, what did you just do?
Well, and this, I'm not just saying this because we're on the CircleCI webinar, but maybe I am, but you can always tell the quality of a product when you're a newbie and you need documentation and you're trying to kind of find your way and how to use it. And every time I think we did one of these 6 months ago. And so, that's not a lot of time to remember what you learned the first time. And it's just such a joy that it's so well documented. It's so easy to use. Yeah, it's a joy to work with you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. Really good to hear that. Okay, looks like we got a question from Raphael here. Hi, just wondering, how does NeuVector carry our DAST and SAST?
Can you tell me what DAST and SAST stand for?
That's going to be dynamic and static application security testing.
Okay, excellent. So with the Static testing, that I'm going to presume would be the, and I'll reshare so I can kind of show you what the product does here. Let's go to NeuVector. So for the static testing, that's where we're doing kind of the scanning, right? So if I click on my assets, look at, we can scan Kubernetes, OpenShift, Rancher. We scan the nodes, containers, we scan your registries. With those, we do the layered scanning. So you see here. So when I think static, I'm thinking of things that don't change necessarily. So all of the settings in Kubernetes, all of your compliance settings, all of the vulnerabilities that might be in an image, even if the image hasn't been deployed yet, over time, CVEs may be found. So now when you do deploy it, it may have additional vulnerabilities that weren't there at the time that it was built. So from that static security analysis, yes, we can check that. We do support under policies here, admission control. If I click on the criteria, you can see high severity count. So even if in your pipeline, in your CircleCI pipeline, the image was clean and it gets deployed, but it might be a week, it might be a period of time before that image gets used, you can still use these basically pod security policies, as well as all of these things plug into admission control so that you can allow or block images that go in. So that would be from the static standpoint. From the dynamic standpoint, that's where our runtime behavioral learning comes into place, right? Those blue lines that we learn, that's information we're seeing dynamically. That is runtime data traffic. We see the layer 7, we see the packet payload. If I click on one of these, you can see we can do packet capture. So that is very unique to NeuVector, that you can actually do a network packet capture inside the environment. So these are kind of countermeasures, if you will, if you're seeing something. The orange lines, what we do is when we move to that monitor or protect mode, that's when we start seeing these orange lines. That wasn't behavior that we saw. So this is that dynamic monitoring that we're constantly doing when we see a network connection that wasn't there when we were in QA or staging, et cetera, right? So these are things you want to be aware of so that you can say, hey, why are we seeing an egress? We also automatically detect like tunneling attacks. Here we've got a red line showing a ping death attack. I think over here I've got another TCP DDoS kind of stack with small. So there's another threat that we have identified. Why are we getting this communication there? So we can alert you even if we don't recognize, if we didn't recognize what that threat was, we would recognize that the network connection hadn't existed before, or if they got in and tried to execute a process, we would recognize that as well. So we can identify it at a threat level, process, network level. So now you're thinking of layers of security. So that's that dynamic element that we can learn the behavior. We can then transform, put that little bubble over it. And if we see anything that breaks that bubble, we let you know that something is amiss, something needs to be looked at. And then you can add those rules. If we see something that this is normal traffic and I want to just make that part of my allow list, I can allow that to happen, and then I won't get those alerts anymore. So very easy to create a kind of a dynamic way of monitoring your applications for that kind of security. Thank you for that question, Raphael. I hope that was the answer you were looking for.
All right, Raphael says yes. Yes. All right. Let's see here. Gonna wait a couple more minutes. Another question from Raphael. Looks like he's still typing.
Take your time, Raphael.
By the way, while we're waiting for Raphael to ask his question, I just wanted to say that I think NeuVector's in a really good field here because, more of the world is just being eaten by software, and so all the cybersecurity stuff is going to be just growing ever more important. And, all the malicious users out there are getting more and more clever about how to attack things. And so I don't think security will ever it will never go down as a field.
Yeah, and it's part of the deal, right? We wish we didn't
Hmm.
have to deal with it. And that's definitely part of kind of our, I guess, one of the reasons why we're around is because developers and folks in ops and even folks in security don't particularly enjoy slowing down software development for the sake of security, right? You want
Hmm.
software development fast. That's the whole reason CircleCI exists, is to speed up velocity and deliver your ideas, right? So you don't want
Yeah.
security slowing you down. And so I think that our growth and the attention that we've been getting so much over the last year and a half is because people are realizing, oh, okay, you can automate a lot of that security and do the fine-grained access, do all the detailed security that is so powerful, but do it in an automated way that you can trust. You trust your sources of truth, and that can help you speed that up. We can keep security kind of out of the way.
Hmm.
And I think that's also why it's such a great fit with using CircleCI, because it's about getting those things out of your way so that you can deliver those ideas as fast as possible.
Yep, for sure. Totally agree. All right. Raphael asks, what is the similarity between Sneak and NeuVector in terms of DevSecOps?
We're both security products. um, uh, won't go into all the details here. And kudos to all of our security product friends out there. The thing that makes us different, I would rather talk about the things that makes NeuVector different, because there's certainly a lot of overlap in the static analysis, scanning, stuff like that. We don't scan static code. We do scan the finished build image. We scan all the packages in it, all of those kind of things. The vulnerability management piece, that's a historical record, right? You don't find CVEs in the future. They're always in the past. They had to be identified, then they have to be fixed, then you have to find them, you have to fix them. So there's lots of products out there with lots of scanning capabilities. We are engaged with the US Air Force Chief Software Officer and the Iron Bank. If you're not familiar, the Air Force is kind of leading the way for the DoD and the US government for improved processes, modernizing applications that have been in the government for ages, going to containers, DevOps, all of these kind of things. They're leading the way on that. They require that any government agency that's doing the software development use 2 scanners, right? They don't trust a single scanner because scanning results can vary from product to product. And so it's a very, very important part of it. And Sneak certainly does a part of that. NeuVector's overlap with NeuVector, certainly. But when we talk about the runtime protection, the dynamic analysis, the ability to learn what's going on here, NeuVector is doing it very, very differently, because we're the only product. We have 6 patents that protect our ability to see live network traffic. We're doing it in a way that's different. And actually, we're the only company that is looking at live traffic. So the difference is that we're seeing all of the traffic, whether it was defined or not. Now, there are fantastic developers out there that would say, Tracy, I've got this thing locked down. I've got my network security policies in place and my pod security policies in place. And I know that the doors are locked. There is no way there's going on. I've got Istio and I've got pod to pod encryption turned on. There's no way that this environment is going to be messed with. And my response to that is fantastic. How are you verifying that? How are you proving that there's nothing there, right? Let's talk about the number of data center break-ins that we've had in the last 10 years, right? There have not been any, because nobody's trying to break into a data center. You've got berms and fences and door locks and security cameras and biometric readers and cages and locks. And, there's so many layers that you would have to get through to even get to someone's cage, right? So we don't hear about those. They don't just lock the doors and say, hey, I've got all the doors locked, you can't get in. No, they have security cameras on those doors to make sure that nothing is going on. So if you're tight and you've got your security airtight, NeuVector will help you validate that you've got it airtight. We're compatible with any cloud, any CNI. We work 100% if you have Istio with encryption turned on. So we can be that verification layer for you. And if you're not quite that mature and maybe you haven't spent a lot of time on your security pod, pod security policies or your network policies, and you need a product that can do that for you, we can do that for you. And that is the big differentiator. We can learn that application behavior. We can turn that into security rules. You can apply those rules to other environments, and you can do the whole thing automated, right? To get that kind of granular security that is so tailored to your specific environment and automate it, that's worth a look. So thank you, Raphael. What's the similarity between SNCC and NeuVector in terms of DevSecOps? Well,
yeah, that was the question that.
Oh, okay, got it.
Let's see here. The next question from Mustafa is, can we detect the scanning from some crawler or search agents to distinguish between them and the real threats?
Yes. Yes, we can. So I don't believe I have a slide for it, but NeuVector will detect, I believe it's like 35 different types of attacks, slow LoRa's, ping deaths, cross-scripting, struts, et cetera, et cetera. So we recognize the patterns of different types of attacks, port scans, things like this. Normally, and customers are different. Some customers are very satisfied to just be in like a monitor mode, just get the alerts and then they watch to see what happens. We have customers that will use a mix of monitor and protect, where they may put protect mode over sensitive data services or things like that. Or we do have customers that are 100% protect mode in production, right? They don't want to just be alerted to that behavior or that something is coming in. They actually want to block it. So we do have intelligence that can help us identify threats versus some just anomalous type of behavior. So threats we can block, anomalous behavior we can block if we're in protect mode. But the key is I need good sources of information. If you're in security, you want accurate, actionable information. That is the most important thing. That's what our customers have taught us, right? That they want to know what they're looking at is true. When they see something that it hasn't been seen before, that if this is not our normal behavior, then that's what they want to spend their time on, not false positives and things like that. So it's fairly straightforward once we have captured that behavior to say, yes, this is normal. And what's not normal. So a lot of those things will detect and alert you that they're a threat automatically. And then other things, like this one right here, that TCP/SEC, we see that kind of threat. And in a protect mode, we would not only block that, we could also automatically do a packet capture. So we do give you some investigative tools, some kind of remediation countermeasures that you can take whenever you see these kind of things. I hope that was a good enough answer for that. Oh, I mean, the intrinsic difference. Yeah, that would get into kind of a, feature by feature kind of thing. If you're interested in a deeper level on that, reach out to info@neuvector.com or reach out to us and we would be happy to dive into those details. And specifically what Mustafa was asking about, detecting scanning from a crawler or something like that. A lot of companies that use NeuVector are using some kind of performance testing or using some kind of crawler, just kind of checking things. And yes, we can, any behavior that we see, you can add that to your known behavior, right? So you can bring network connections or processes inside that zero trust bubble. If you trust them and you want to bring them inside that bubble, absolutely can. If we see some kind of performance analyzer doing things and it's not recognized before, you can add it to that behavior. So it's always manageable to what's inside that bubble and what you want to be alerted to.
All right. Thank you very much, Tracy. I don't think there are any additional questions. Maybe wait just another few seconds here in case anyone has any. All right, I'll take that as a no. Okay, so thank you all of you for joining us on today's webinar. Thank you to Tracy for co-hosting this webinar with us and for talking about your product. all these slides and whatnot can be made available to you. If you want to email, feel free to email marketing@circleci.com and we can send over the slides and more information to you. Alternatively, you can probably also reach out directly to NeuVector as well for more information about their product. Thank you to everybody who attended, and the video recording of this webinar will be made available online as well.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.